Hello, everybody, and welcome to another on-demand event powered by demandDrive. My name is AJ Alonso. I will be the host today, and I've got a fantastic guest with me, Maggie Bloom, the sales evangelist over at Mailshake. Maggie, how are you?
I'm doing super well. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, AJ.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I'm really excited to dig into some engagement tactics for cold email, tear down a cold email in the 30 minutes that we have, and give you, the listener and watcher of this, some good tips on how to structure a cold email, take those back with you, and start getting better and more positive engagement rates on your own messaging. So I think this is going to be, a get your hands dirty type session and really figure out what we can change, what levers we can pull and tweak to help you get more positive replies. So I'm excited to dig in here.
Awesome. Same here.
Yeah. So, but before we actually jump in, and I have an email to share with everyone, before we go ahead and do that, let's get a quick introduction to you, Maggie. I know you've done some stuff with us before, but if the audience doesn't know who you are at this point somehow, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maggie. I work at Mailshake and I'm a sales evangelist there. And what Mailshake does, we're a sales engagement platform. So I always like to tell people I'm a salesperson selling sales software to other salespeople. So I talk about sales a lot, but specifically cold email. Our focus when it comes to Mailshake and what sets us apart from other sales engagement platforms is deliverability, which I could talk about deliverability all day, but it's really important when it comes to outreach because it's your whole idea of getting your message through to the inbox. So we'll be talking about a few of those things today, but yeah, that's all about me.
And Maggie did talk about deliverability at length in one of our podcast episodes. So make sure to check that out. I'll go ahead and link it in the description, but it is incredibly important. And I know, like you said, we'll touch on some of those aspects here today, but realistically, when building a cold email, you don't just have to think about the content. You got to think about how it's getting into someone's inbox. It's all connected.
Totally.
Awesome. So what I wanted to do with you today, Maggie, was sort of tear down a cold email that I got. We can go through and pick out some areas in which the SDR did a good job, in some spots where they could improve. And then throughout that process, kind of tease out a few different engagement tactics that you, as sort of the expert here, have seen work really effectively in terms of getting someone to actually respond to cold emails. What people typically do that doesn't work, that might be pervasive with a lot of SDRs today. And then we can kind of wrap up with some major points on how to help individuals get just better at writing cold emails. So I'll go ahead and pull that up. We can kind of start looking at the email here. 1 second to share my screen.
Can't wait. And so, yeah, while we're going to have like a first look at it, AJ, I know this email obviously went to you because it says, "Hey, AJ." So, well, maybe I could ask these questions once we kind of read through it. But I just wanted to hear your like initial thoughts about it. But I think giving some context and reading through it could be helpful too.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just kind of quickly breeze through it, and then I'll give my initial, like, I got this email in my inbox, what did I do with it?
Totally.
Spiel. So the subject line was, "Cheers to our love of whiskey." It says, "Hey AJ, born and raised in Scotland, home of whiskey. I appreciate your love for it, so please go treat yourself to this delicious bottle. I know you like Eagle Rare, but have you tried this before?" Link. "In researching you in demandDrive, I've identified where our company can bring major value to our marketing team and to the SDRs at your company. Our account-based platform, powered by AI, can predict the timing of when accounts are in market for demandDrive to help you increase and convert pipeline with targeted messaging. Any chance I could grab time with you this week or next to have a quick 30-minute chat to discuss all things sales and our love for whiskey? Cheers, SDR." So yes, this email did pop into my inbox, and I did open and respond to it. And I actually did take the meeting with this individual.
Wow.
I opened it because it said "Cheers to our love of whiskey" as the subject line. And I'm not someone who gets prospected a ton, but I would say 90% of the messages that I do get, the subject lines all look the same. They're all like, how to help you increase pipeline conversion or blah, blah, blah. It's something very generic, right? So this one stood out immediately, which is why I opened it. And as I was reading through it, and the company was one that I was familiar with, I responded because we actually have a need for a product like theirs that was top of mind for me at the moment that I opened the email. So the window for me to respond to something like this was wide open. And it was obviously relevant to like what I was doing in that exact moment. So
Amazing.
I responded because the timing of this rep was just perfect. Not because the email was exceptionally well written or anything like that, but I did note that obviously they had done some research. They knew that I liked whiskey. It's all over my LinkedIn profile. Like I literally put in my profile about section that I love Eagle Rare. So like they took the time to do that. So kind of a combination of like, you've done your homework, you hooked me with the subject line. It's something we talked about literally 2 days before. I'll go ahead and take a meeting.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So I want to give this SDR praise right now because obviously they got what they wanted out of the email, or not what they wanted, but what the goal was. You booked a meeting with them. The timing was right. It was super targeted to you. It was a problem that you were probably most likely going through at the time. So that alone, and any advice that we give today, I'm going to say it'll probably be nitpicky because this SDR did a great job. And just like you said, from that personalization they used in a subject line, and it wasn't just the boring old subject lines that you typically see or the ones that are overused. So whether they use personalization to get your attention or they just use something new, I always congratulate SDRs if they can do that and think outside the box. You don't have to get crazy creative, but at least mentioning something that resonates with you and it's something that's all over your LinkedIn profile. So nothing too creepy that they would know that you like whiskey.
Yeah, they didn't dive into like some weird offshoot Foursquare account that I had. It's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for giving us your thoughts about that. Should we just kind of dive in and go over some pros and cons and break this down?
Yeah, go ahead. So I know you've got some notes about kind of each section of the email. So we can start with the subject line if you want, or we can kind of just glaze over that because clearly like they did their research and they know what works. But any best practices maybe that you have for that, and we can kind of just move down from the top to the bottom of the email and go through each one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's start with the subject line and then that first paragraph there, basically. So yeah, like I just was talking with Samantha McKenna, who's, brought up the idea of show me you know me. And this SDR did this perfectly. They went to your LinkedIn profile, like we just mentioned. They knew that you liked whiskey. They even pointed out the Eagle Rare, which I've never heard of that brand before, but I don't drink whiskey. But they knew all those things about you. And they used it to grab your attention. So I think that's great. And what I really like about it, just like you said, like it's not an email that starts out like we can help 10x your marketing and SDR team. But they started out with the preview text, like born and raised in Scotland. So like for me, I'd be like, okay, what is this going to like turn into? You know what I mean? So I really like that they did that. I think that's kind of going into show me you know me, and then where people talk about flipping the script. So it's not just starting out the same way as every other email of like, hope you're doing well. So I think that SDR rocked it right there. I just have a question. This is just open panel here because I've gotten prospected this way a few times in the past where people send me a gift on a prospecting email.
I knew this was going to come up.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on it? Like, I don't know. Do you feel, I hear some people saying like, I feel guilted into taking a meeting. Some people like it. What do you think about it?
I think if you do a good job at making the gift part of the reason that you're reaching out, and it's related to maybe the message in some capacity, that it's like totally fine. In this situation where it's like, I've done my research, I know that you like whiskey, and there's we can talk about this in terms of like continuity and relevance, but like if you're able to weave that concept, that bit of personalization into the value proposition that you deliver, somehow kind of bringing whiskey like through the email into the CTA, I think it's totally fine to include that as a gift. Where I do see a lot of people talk about, and where I feel guilty about sort of taking a gift, is if someone's like, I'd love to get a meeting with you. Here's $100 Amazon gift card. But there's no like, it's just them trying to essentially bribe you into taking a meeting versus like, I think this is going to be so valuable for you, and I've done my research and I know that's the case. I'm willing to pony up $100 to kind of tell you that, or like show you how confident I am.
Yeah.
That's like, you don't get that a lot when someone's like, here's $100, please hop on a call. That's
Yeah.
Then I feel guilty.
Yeah, it's like you're getting an apology gift or something of like someone's like, I don't know you that well, but here's an Amazon gift card because I'm sorry or something. So I don't have more to add to that. I think you said it perfectly. I totally agree with you too. I think if it has to have some relevance to what you're actually asking them, if it makes sense for them to, if it's kind of showing them, in that case, you know them, of course, I think that that works out well. So awesome job, I'd say overall with the SDR there. Any other comments before we kind of move into the next part?
Um, no, I mean, I've got a fun fact. They can't deliver liquor to Massachusetts, so I had to go through a workaround with this one, but that's a story for another time. Let's go ahead and jump into the second part of the email here and see, Maggie, what some of the pros and cons that you kind of picked out were.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's first start out with the pros. The style of how they're kind of leading into things, I think works well. So let's just read it right here. In researching you and demandDrive, I have identified where, their company can bring major value to your marketing team and to the SDRs at your company. I see what they're trying to do here. So I have a bit more cons to note on here. Like I said, I'm being nitpicky with this email. It did the job. It got a meeting out of it. But I think this is where there's a lot of vagueness, and this is where like targeting and using some targeted messaging could really help out here. So just where like I've identified where like we can bring you value, like what have you identified? Put that in there. Talk about like what you've identified, and then also, what's other major value that marketing teams have seen with working with you. So can you use percentages in there? Can you use an actual place where you found in your research, because you did do your research, you at least did your research on AJ, do research on the company, just like you said in researching you and demandDrive. I think that's where they kind of missed out here. It's too vague. They could get really nitty gritty and have like a great statistic in there or a great thing from your website of where they can help out. And I think from a continuity standpoint, that's where they could say, like, in researching you, not only that you like whiskey, and then kind of going into it. So that whiskey comment, which they do tie in at the end, is really, really naturally flown through that email. But I'd say they need to be a little less vague here.
I would agree, and I think that, in my opinion, continuity is one of the biggest things that reps are missing. That like jump from personalization to, okay, here's my pitch. It's almost like the second part of the email could be for anybody, and they've just copy pasted it below a bit of personalization that they've done. So like they do the job and they hook you in, but then it reads like, I'm anybody getting this email. And there are some, I know you in the rewrite that you did, which we'll show at the end of this, there's a really easy way for you to kind of keep the continuity of that personalization, that hook into the value proposition, instead of just using phrases like when I was doing research or that being said, blah, 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 blah. Like that one kills me all the time. I'm like, all right, I've done my job personalizing this. That being said, let's jump into the non-personalized pitch that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're just personalizing it for you, which is not a bad thing. You're the person on the other side of this email, but like they're not really talking about like any personalization they've done about like the space that you're in and what struggles you might be dealing with. And also that your company, so demandDrive, there's no like correlation in between there. And that's such a good thing. I think like the way you have to think of this personalization is the same way you have to think of discovery questions. If you're just rapid firing discovery questions to someone and there's no context behind it, it's going to sound really awkward. And you feel awkward as like the sales rep there doing it too. So I definitely think if you can tie it back in there, I think that would be great. So being a bit more specific, how and where have you identified it so you really feel like you're speaking to demandDrive and you specifically? And what major value can you bring? Do you have percentages to back that up? Do you have any type of like factual advice that can do that? So I think that's where they could have done a bit better there. And then the next part. So this is kind of one of these concepts that I like to say of like leaving out the how. And so they talk about like a benefit that your team could use from, the marketing team to the SDR team at your company. They've identified major value there. But then they go into here of saying our account-based platform powered by AI can predict the timing of when accounts are in market for demandDrive to help you increase and convert pipeline with targeted messaging. It's kind of a mouthful for one sentence. Just that's why I like to read these out loud when I'm going through it. But it's leaving out the how. So that's how their team could do that for you. But I think they need to build up a bit more of that pain and why this is something that you would want to care about. And then that how is something that can be tied into the CTA. And this is something borrowed from my colleague Jed, but I don't think you need to talk about all of that. And guess what? It's going to shorten that email. And everyone's always talking about like shorter emails. That's one way that you can shorten it, is leaving out the how in there.
I like that. Yeah, I'm laughing because I think when you read your own email out loud, sometimes you realize that like these little things, like you said, leaving out the how, like you say it and you're like, that either doesn't make any sense or that's a huge mouthful, or I'm just like regurgitating something that exists on our website or in this piece of marketing collateral. Like, what's the value of me just copy pasting something that this person could probably find out on their own in a very like flowery or corporate like speak that takes away from any authenticity or personalization that I've already done. Like, it's a weird sort of like, I did this thing for you and then here's this copy pasted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's like you want to make it seem like the whole email is written for you. And that doesn't even always just happen with like adding personalization tokens in there, like, your name, your company, things like that. It's going a bit deeper and figuring out like, what is AJ complaining about over a bottle of whiskey to his SDR team?
A whole bottle?
Yeah. No, or a glass responsibly. But yeah, like that's a way that you can kind of tie up this email if you wanted to totally rewrite it with a whole different thing, but really hit home at those things that are major pain points, or I always like to say it's like something that could twist the knife when you send it over to someone. So that's what I think about that part. I think it could be just taken out or really put into that CTA so people are wondering like, hey, how could I do that? So then that could be some collateral there too. But the CTA, so kind of the last part of this, any chance I could grab time with you this week or next to have a quick 30-minute chat to discuss all things sales and our love for whiskey. So I like that they tied in the whiskey part of this again. It's kind of going back to the thing that they said originally. So it wasn't just like, boom, here's this whiskey and I'm never going to mention it again and the rest of it, which we said some areas where they could get a little bit better with that, but at least they tied it in at the end and kind of made something like, like we're going to chat over whiskey or something like that. The things I don't like really love about this is it's all things sales is also vague. So that's kind of the feedback that we've given overall, like all things sales, that sounds a bit overwhelming for me reading it. And I also, so that part of it, the other part is really just having it clear and having it absolutely on one line. It doesn't really need to be that long. You could say like, any chance I could grab time with you this week? That's it, or something like that. And then mention the whiskey thing, or I think what I have in my rewrite was interested in learning how we can do this with AI. So if you take out the how, that's where you're really enticing the how in there. But those are just my thoughts on that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the CTA is an area that a lot of reps need work with, because it's awkward to ask somebody for something if you haven't really given them a reason to want it. And a lot of cases, it's more of like, I just talked about this on a podcast recently, it's more of like an FYI than a CTA, where it's like,
Yeah,
here's all of this stuff that I think could be helpful for you. And they leave the CTA either open enough or vague enough where it's like, you make the next best move, or it's so specific where they're like, do you have 15 minutes on Tuesday the 13th to talk about this? And it's like, you're pigeonholing me into this one spot where I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. So I feel like a CTA that allows me to take what I've learned in the email and asks me a simple question like, is this worth learning more about? Or like, have time next week to chat. Like something quick and punchy, I think is the best way to go about it. I really like the rewrite that you did, because it does tie a little bit into some of the stuff that you left out from the original email, the AI portion, and bringing it into the CTA, because it's a little bit of an interest peak, right? I'm like, oh, with AI, like now maybe that's something we've talked about internally. Maybe investing more in AI tools is something we want to do for 2023. Now I'm in. Now you got me.
Yeah, exactly. Use that as an enticing line at the end. Like, what's going to get someone to respond? And like, just read your own emails that you get. Like, is this compelling enough for me to respond to? And that's where you're going to introduce and make that sales cycle really smooth. You're going to talk about how AI can do that on the call with them. It's not just going to be talking about all things sales. It's going to be talking about AI and how this company can help your team and your SDR team. So I think that's where that could be really helpful in there. And also mentioning something about the whiskey, tying that in there, you can too, and get creative with it. But also making the CTA, yes, something really easy, yes or no. And this person right here, any chance, just be confident about it. Like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to grab time? That's, kind of the area that we'll want to go into.
Yeah. Let me actually pull your rewrite up so people can see what you did to this email to change it up and kind of go through the changes that you made here. So let me share. Cool. So this is your email, Maggie. Go ahead and take it away. What did you say here?
Yeah. So subject line, intro paragraph, all stayed the same. I loved it. And then just the couple of things that I mentioned here. So you can see it's a bit shorter. But right here you say in researching X. So what is that X that you researched about the company, about you? And then in like a or brackets, I didn't know what to say there, but not only your drinking habits, because we know that that's something that they said, yeah, and a wink face, like whatever their branding is, and if they feel comfortable putting that out there, but they're tying in that previous paragraph with that one. And then goes into identified that my company can help you increase and convert pipeline. So I actually borrowed that from that paragraph that was talking about AI and the how, but can help you increase and convert pipeline by X%. We've done it with other marketing teams like X and Y, interested in learning how we can do this with AI. So it's shortening it. We're not talking so much about the high. Like we don't have that one liner in there, like you said, that you can find on their website that's like, we're this company, we can do this, this, and this. And we're also putting some specifics in there and percentages, and maybe even mentioning some other teams or brands that would resonate with you specifically, like your competitors. Do you have to put those brands in there? Not all the time, but they can help. And I like to do it as a tactic too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest unlocks for SDRs is that oftentimes if they're referencing a customer of theirs, marketing or their managers will tell them in your emails, go ahead and drop like the biggest, juiciest
Yeah.
right? Like we've worked with Amazon, Oracle. And for me, like I could care less if you've done great work for Oracle, because like what you do for them won't be the same that you do for me.
Yeah.
And so I think to your point, like having some hard data to back it up, like the whole leaving out the how, but like coming into that paragraph with more of like we've done this. This is a stat that we can back that up with. And these are the companies we've done it with. If that's an impressive statistic and it's with a company that I recognize, either in my space because it's a competitor or just someone that looks like me, I'm a lot more compelled to get back to you rather than seeing what you've done for a whale of a company like Amazon. Whole different story.
Yeah. Also, when you hear something, that's such a great point. When you hear someone like Amazon, if someone sent me an email like that, the only thing I'm thinking of is price tag. Like, okay, Amazon can afford you.
Yeah.
But can Mailshake afford you? I have no clue. So yeah, make sure that if you are going to drop other company names that you worked with, make sure it's relevant. And yeah, someone that they would care about in there. And that's at the end of the day, when you're thinking about email, write stuff that they would care about or talk about things that they would care about in there.
Yeah. I think that's like whenever I do an email teardown or talk with someone about like, what are the best engagement tactics or things that you can do to get someone to open up your email and actually respond. Mm-hmm. It all comes down to like, just write something that they're going to care about.
Yeah.
And obviously that's difficult to do if you're an SDR and you're supposed to be doing hundreds of activities a day. But if you can prioritize sort of like the outreach that you're doing and you pick out 10 to 15 target accounts that you absolutely want to get in touch with, and you just write emails for Maggie at Mailshake and not just general salespeople at tech companies, I can almost guarantee you'll get better engagement on your emails rather than some of the more generic stuff or templated stuff that you would send out to a larger persona of yours.
Yeah, yeah. And one more note to put on that is like, yeah, at the end of the day, even if you are going to write prospecting emails for a group of people, pick one person out of there. Make sure that you're targeting pretty specific. Like I always tell people, there's no reason you should have like more than 30 people in a target persona campaign. Like really split those up. But yeah, make sure you just pull one person out of that crowd, write the email basically for them. And it doesn't always have to have like really intense personalization in there. And what I mean by that is like, that's awesome that they did the research on you about whiskey, but like, do you have time to do that for every single person? Maybe. Yeah, I don't think all of us do. Or maybe we have like a VA helping us do that. That would be amazing. But we most likely, yeah, we most likely don't. So do something amazing like that for your Target account. I'm sure it sounded like this was such a need for you at the time. So maybe they knew that with intent data or anything else like that. And they really did a good job. Just like I said, overall, I was being nitpicky on that email, and they got what they wanted out of it too.
For sure. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. Is there anything else kind of in general after going through that teardown in regards to like best practices or things that you would recommend for someone who crafts cold emails outside of what we talked about that they should keep in mind when they're writing for engagement? Like a big, I guess, like takeaway from this outside of, some of the stuff we talked about, like write for an individual person or leaving out the how, like any other tactics that you would have for someone.
Yeah. So outside of the things that we talked about, and when you're really trying to get engagement, and a lot of us, as SDRs out there, have to have sequence set up. It's part of our KPIs. Like, we're doing 5 to 7 touches. One of the easiest ways I feel like getting engagement, and something to also back up those statistics that you talk about, is using a case study or case study as your CTA. It's giving them something for free. Maybe it's a how-to guide. Maybe it's a percentage that you did with another client, again, that resonates with them. But I always think that's a great one to drive engagement. And I love giving something for free over to people, whether it be, whiskey or a gift like that, but really just valuable information they're going to care about at the end of the day. So that's one of the things that I love doing. And it's simple. You can put statistics like that in there and use the CTA of like, hey, we did this with customer X. Do you want to see, our case study that we did about it? Or do you want to see how we could do it with you too? So I always think that that's a really good one that you can have in there. It's something that you can just whip up today, basically.
Yeah, I like that idea. Like make the deposit right beforehand, try and build up some of that trust, that credibility before you ask for something like 15 minutes on someone's calendar. Because, a lot of SDRs might not think it, but like 30 minutes on a target account's calendar is gold. Like that is an insane thing to ask for if they don't trust you, know you, feel like you can help them in any capacity. So the more deposits you can make, I love the idea of like dropping sort of like the hint at, we did this for XYZ company, we can do it for you. Do you want to learn how? Like teasing it a little bit.
Yeah.
You're making that deposit. You're showing them that you can back up what you're saying, and it engages them to follow up with you and actually like say, yeah, I'd love to learn more, or whatever they might say.
Absolutely. Yeah. But really great job, like I said, with this SDR showing them that they know you. So I recommend that SDRs do that as well. Just find pieces of information in there. But yeah, those are kind of my 2 cents around it.
Awesome. Well, hey, this was a great session, Maggie. Thanks so much for A, tearing that email down, and B, rewriting it into something else. I think there's a lot of bits of information within that rewrite that SDRs can take home and try out. Like you said, little tweaks you can make that you can try today to get some positive results on your engagement. If people want to connect with you and maybe continue this conversation and learn more about you, about Mailshake, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can follow me on LinkedIn, which is like the most basic basic thing that people say when they're done with episodes like this. But follow me on LinkedIn. It's just, the LinkedIn handle /Maggie Bloom, BLUME. And then I'm also coming out with shake sales videos. You can follow those on YouTube, Mailshake Shake Sales. I'm where I interview sales leaders out there so they can teach you a little bit more about sales. And then I also do my own weekly teardowns on LinkedIn Live. It's actually bi-weekly, but follow me on LinkedIn. You can learn about all the things I just mentioned.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, Maggie. Really appreciate it. Thank you, listener, for listening. Catch more on-demand events like this. Go ahead and sign up once, and you get access to all future and past events. It's a pretty good deal, if I say so myself. So we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again for being here, Maggie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, AJ. Bye.